When looking for the king of podcasts, you're at the wrong channel.
Well, excuse me!
Looking for good ideas for life? You're far from good hands.
Hey, bud, what's your problem?
If you think the listener is always right, you're far from the right place.
Out of order! Even in the future, nothing works!
Hosted by a Northeasterner by birth, but a rebel by choice.
Are you threatening me?
If you want a host that floats between love and madness,
and we know the night is always gonna be here anyway. Thinking of you's working up my appetite. Looking forward to a little afternoon delight.
then play on and listen to Crazy Train Radio.
All right, guys, listen to this blues riff and B. Watch me for the changes and try and keep up, okay?
Within the gaming world, there are your general gamers, but then there are those that enjoy the dark underbelly of gaming. If you're one of those that enjoy the dark underbelly of gaming, we certainly got the place to send you. Scorpion Lair Games. That's right, Scorpion Lair Games is the creators of the true crime hit Killers, the card game. Let's not forget they also have Killers Clothing Company, their profiler game, and things like the 5-Minute Murder channel on YouTube. And we certainly can't forget the new book that is certainly a hit, Beyond the Headliners, True Crimes, Myths, and Legends. Make sure you visit Jeff and the Scorpion Lair Games on Facebook and everywhere today. Hey folks, it's your least favorite host in the podcast world, Croc, Jonathan Steele. And boy, do we have a good one for you today.
Hey, I'm Les Thatcher, and you're listening to Crazy Train Radio.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, our next guest is Cincinnati born and bred. He was a NWA Rookie of the Year and spent a good majority of his career in the southeast regions of the old territory system. And there's so much more to get to with this gentleman, but we welcome back Les Thatcher. Les, how you doing?
I'm doing good, Jonathan. How about yourself?
Right on. And Mike Lano is with us as well again, who made the initial introduction back in 2020. So there's so much to get to again. How have things been the past couple of years? Obviously, we were speaking initially during COVID and such. So you've been, I should mention, because Mike actually just mentioned this to me too. Les, you got a training seminar out in, I think, Vegas coming up, right?
No, not in Vegas. It's in Waterloo at the Hall of Fame induction weekend. Yeah. And actually, I've got one in April in Kingsport, Tennessee. And that's a 3-day. The one in Waterloo in July is on the 19th. That's a Saturday. The induction weekend runs Thursday, Friday, Saturday at the Hall of Fame in Waterloo. And and the camp is going to be on Saturday, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. Lunch will be served. And joining me will be, let me think, everybody. D'Lo Brown, James Beard, Joe Malenko, and Ron Hutchison. Ron's being inducted, as a matter of fact, that weekend in the trainers wing of the hall. But the group of us together adds up to over 200 years of experience. So you should be able to learn something, I think.
Yeah, and 150 of that is D'Lo Brown.
Good answer. Good answer. I like the way you think.
He'd like you to think so, probably.
Yeah, true. Mike, do you want to start things off?
Well, I continually say this. I haven't talked to Les in a couple of years. I think we had him on a different show after we did it here on Crazy Train Radio in 2020. It doesn't seem like it was that long ago, but I always say Les is the sharpest guy from the absolutely best portion, the television era of wrestling. Sharpest. He keeps up with today's product. When I first started conversing with him, just a mark neophyte photographer in the early 70s, he was sending me results and stuff from Atlanta, where he worked for the Paul Jones office. And I think Les, like, almost single-handedly did the program. He wore many hats, as he's always done, on up to, his magnificent work as a wrestler, doing commentary for everybody. I mean, he was one of the big major mega voices amongst many legends for Jim Cornette's Smoky Mountain Wrestling, which we all love. Les always, these training seminars, I remember Les did it annually for a number of years at Cauliflower Alley. But one of the biggest, you had some of the, you had Harley and Les, and then you had Killer Kowalski and the Hart brothers, and from the Washington State, Oregon area, Buddy Rose and Easy Ed Wiskowski, who we just lost. And Les is just, constantly is active, giving back to this profession, this industry. And when he mentioned Ron Hutchison, of course, Ron had the dojo in Toronto with Sweet Daddy Siki, who we just lost, who was one of those in my book. He wasn't the first like a Jim Mitchell or those gentlemen. We just talked to somebody doing the history of African-American wrestlers, but he was a pioneer with Bobo Brazil, Sailor Art Thomas, Dory Dixon, Rocky John. Well, Rocky came later, Bearcat Wright. And we were talking about Buddy Rogers, and that was Sweet Daddy Siki's act. He was the Black Nature Boy.
Yeah. Well, as a kid, going to matches in Cincinnati, and first saw it on TV in the late 40s, and somebody else's TV. We didn't even have one at home, but we started going to the matches, which were promoted by Al Half. And at that point, Half was one of the biggest promotions in the NWA. So virtually everybody you saw on everybody else's television, along with those that were in our region, ended up coming through Cincinnati or through the Half promotion at some point in time. So you're talking Bearcat. But the one thing I learned after I got into business, and one of the things that made Buddy so successful, is when he went into a territory, Bearcat, Siki, Billy Darnell, Von Goring, Austin, all guys he knew he could have matches with, all guys he knew he'd made money with before, came in as well, which is a good business when you get right down to it. But yeah, we as a kid, I got to see. And I can't wait to see the Mildred Burke movie, because Billy Wolf during that period was based in Columbus. So probably everybody that's talked about or played in the movie, I've seen wrestle either live in Cincinnati or else on the TV at one point in time. It was just a great melting pot for professional wrestling during the late 40s into the mid 50s.
Jonathan, can I just ask two questions before I forget?
Yeah, sure.
Ohio, few people know what a big deal Ohio was back then. It was, huge. We normally think of Vince Sr. and Jess McMahon and blah, blah, blah. But Ohio was so huge, and it was so packed with talent. And I've never asked Les this, if he was around when Roy Shire was teaming there with Ray as the Shire brothers, Ray Stevens. And then he took a ton of talent from Haft to go start in San Francisco, and he dragged them all with him. I'm talking Bob Ellis, Kenji Shibuya, Pepper Gomez, I think Mitsuharu Okawa, Ray Stevens, of course. You just a wealth of talent. Brought all these guys in, and they were his bread and butter from 61 to 63 in San Francisco. And I don't know what was going on there. Did like Al Haft, did he get pissed that Roy took?
Actually, I saw Roy when he was the professor. He started with Haft, but when he teamed with Ray, that was for Barnett. That was during the opposition. Barnett was running Cincinnati Gardens, and Haft was running Music Hall. Al had always run Music Hall anyway, but the Gardens was built, I think, in 55 or maybe 54, whatever. But yeah, there was competition at that point. It was like, for example, in any given month, Haft might run on the first and third weeks, and Barnett would be there on the second and fourth week. So there was wrestling going on, plus television. But, well, when you mentioned Ray, the first time I saw Ray, he was like 15 or 16 years old. And at one point, they had him teamed up as the Stevens brothers with Donnie Fargo. So you want to talk about two guys that could bump and work like champions. Don and Ray were great together. I never got a chance to work with Ray till later in his career. That would have been in the 70s when he came into the Carolinas. But yeah, just a multitude of talent came through there. And like I say, in the 50s, Mike, we had WLWT in Cincinnati, Channel 5 had wrestling. Dayton, WLWD in Dayton, we also picked their wrestling up. Sunnyside in New York, Marigold in Chicago, Hollywood wrestling from Hollywood Legion Stadium. Yeah, hey, that's where I first saw Leo before, and then worked for Leo years later when he was a booker. But Leo and his dad were a great tag team at that point. And of course, we also had Texas style wrestling, which was probably the hardcore wrestling of that era, if you want to call it that. But yeah, so, and eventually, when you mention Ohio being important, Haft ran Ohio, Michigan, West Virginia, and Indiana, and Kentucky. And some of the old guys that I had a chance to meet and work with early in my career that had worked there during that time, they were saying that even if you were a preliminary wrestler during that period, you were making $300, $400, $500 a week. Now realize that's back in the late 40s and early 50s when $300 or $400 a week was big money. In fact, I forget who it was. One of them said, if I made less than $300 a week, I just gave my notice. But he had shows going in all the, at least 3 shows, probably a night in varying states. So yeah, he was a major player at that point in time. Actually, I think he just backed out of it at some point. I always heard the story that he wanted to adopt Ray Stevens.
Al Haft?
Yes, legitimately adopt Ray. He liked him that much and saw the future in him, I guess. But of course, it never happened. But yeah, it was a great time for me to grow up. And like I say, Buddy Rogers was my childhood idol. I can't tell you what, because he was a babyface there in Cincinnati. In that territory at that time, he was a babyface. Wow. I never realized he was a heel until later when I started, with the magazines. I thought, oh my God, Buddy's a heel too. But when I look back, once I got smart to the business, I realized I couldn't have looked at a better role model in that period of time if I'd have tried, because you're right. He was the best of the best. There's no two ways about that.
I'm going to put here's my last thing, and then I'll shut up. I'm going to put the other things I was going to think of aside. You were in Mid-Atlantic when, was it George or Sandy asked Buddy Rogers to come in and help Flair get over the Nature Boy thing. And they did some 6-mans and regular tags and maybe a singles before Buddy left. It was only a short period of time. I'm thinking 1978. Were you still there?
Actually, I wish I had been there, but I had moved here to Knoxville. And from November 74 to November 77, I was working I was doing television and wrestling in both territories. I had the apartment in Charlotte. I was there from Monday through Thursday. I'd fly in here on Friday, work house show Friday night, TV Saturday morning, house show Saturday night, and fly back to Charlotte on Sunday. And I did that from November 74, November 77 before I moved up here. And then Buddy came into Charlotte after I'd left, and it really upset. You know what? If I say I celebrate my 65th anniversary in the business, my first match, July 4th of this year. And in all that period of time, I never got to meet Buddy Rogers once I was in the business. I have a picture of him and I, when I was 12 years old, taken in Music Hall in Cincinnati, that I'm proud to have. But I never got to meet Buddy when I was in the business. And that's one of the things I always wanted to do, was just work one match with the guy, just to say that I never got that opportunity.
I'm going to send you photos I took. I posed him at his place in Florida with his last wife, Debbie, and their son, who he tried to get into the biz, and it didn't work out. I think his name was David. But he still looked like $1 million. This was before the freak accident that took him from us in 93, 92, 93. Slipping in that supermarket. Mark asked him in line to sign something, and there was some water on the floor, and he slipped, broke his elbow. They gave him the wrong antibiotic at the hospital. It was a big nightmare, but he still looked like $1 million. And he had mellowed so much that in 91 at the Arizzi convention, he made up with Thez, and they're both speaking High German to each other. So I'm sitting there with a tape recorder just marveling. And the dude looked like $1 million. He was as nice and sweet as can be. Gone were the days of the Carl Gotch and Bill Miller shooting on him, pissed off at him, or Bruno pissed off at him, or whatever. He had mellowed. What a pleasure to be around the guy. He was just aces. I'm
going to tell you a funny story. I think it's funny anyway. When I had some of the guys that were, around at that period of time, you bring up Buddy's name, had no balls, didn't have any guts. I said, what do you mean? Well, Miller and Gotch called him out. And he didn't get up. I said, are you nuts? Why? He was the smartest man I ever could have think of. You stand up to Carl Gotch and Bill Miller together. I wouldn't have stood up to one of them by themselves, for God's sakes. But yeah, the guy was a master. Well, I'll tell you what, when I use the Rogers match with O'Connor from 61 at Comiskey Park as a training tool. I tell kids, watch these guys' body language, facial expressions, and realize they're not diving out of the ring. It's all done with their body language, facials, and done in the ring. It can still be done that way. It's just nobody's interested, I think, is the problem. But yeah, Buddy is a yardstick to measure wrestlers by, no doubt about it.
And last thing, what about the heat he got? The last line, just a mere couple of words, and to a nicer guy, it couldn't happen, and the place went ballistic.
Yeah, absolutely. Ernie Roth and I got to be buddies, and Ernie sat at Buddy's knee. He actually lived with Buddy and Buddy's, I don't know which wife it was. Anyway, while they were in Columbus, Ernie lived with them a year. And Ernie had a sharp head for finishes and stuff too. But when he was managing up in New York for Vince Sr., I was in Charlotte. He called me, he said, you want to work with Rogers? And I said, I always have wanted to work with Rogers. He said, well, you can work with him now. I said, what are you talking about? He said, well, if you want to come in up here, I guarantee you'll get a chance to work with him. The problem with that was I always looked at New York as in that time as the land of the giants, right? Bruno. And they brought in all the big guys to work with Bruno. And I realized I was doing well in the Carolinas, and I said, Ernie, I'd love to do it, but I can't afford to take off here to come up there to be sure I get to work with Buddy as much as I would like to do that. So I was upset that I'd already moved from Charlotte when he came in there for the short period of time. I don't think I got to work with him, but at least I got to sit down and talk to him and pick his brain a little bit, I think. But yeah, a master. I've had some of the old guys tell me that they have seen him work heel in the first fall, babyface the second fall, and come back and heel again in the third fall. He had that kind of talent.
Yeah.
I got to see, I'll tell you, great matches, him and Darnell.
Yeah.
And at
Darnell was in his little camp, Maurice Berend, Johnny Valentine, and I had them both in my Oakland studio, or near, it was the city of Alameda years ago, like '91. And Buddy brought him in by train because obviously Johnny was afraid of airplanes after the plane accident,
Right.
And brought him in and revealed that since the '50s he'd always called Johnny Valentine Booby, and I can't really say why on TV or on the show.
Right.
But for those who don't know, Ernie Roth was, of course, a million different things. Mr. Clean, the Grand Wizard of Wrestling for Vince Sr., and of course, longest gimmick as Abdullah Farouk, the Weasel, managing the Sheik in Detroit.
Armstrong K. When he was with,
he had a ton of other.
Yeah. But a hell of a fertile mind for the business and a good guy too.
And he was a radio DJ before he got into the business. So
yeah, in Canton, Ohio. Yeah.
Well, I'm probably going to catch a little heat with this because you guys talking about Rogers, but I would like your opinion or facts if you happen to know it. But I know Mike said about the heat with some guys like Bruno and such, and I heard Bruno say in an interview, I think it was kayfabe commentaries or something, and he was saying about the dislike for Rogers because he was one of those type guys, like you guys were saying, would come in with his crew of guys to a territory, hot shot it, and then just leave it flat when they left. Was that usually the case with Buddy?
I can only speak for Ohio, and it's too far back for me to look because, like I say, the war there when Barnett started running in that area out of Indianapolis and came into Cincinnati, that would have been in the early 50s at that time. I believe Buddy, I think Buddy had left at that period of time. And some of those guys are still around, maybe. But you're right. Now, if that was the case, if they all went with him to another territory, I really don't know. But that's a possibility. And but about hot shotting a territory, every territory, you can say they're all hot shotted at some point. Any territory or any wrestling business, if they have a graph, of their business, you're going to see peaks and valleys. It's just like any other business. I mean, I've seen, like right now, one of the things that people talk about, and I say, WWE in the last 2 years reminds me of a hot territory because once Levesque took over, it became, like the bloodline was as close to old school heat and building a story and taking the time to build that story as I've seen in recent years. And, it's there, but at some point, and they're red hot now. I don't see them falling on their face anytime soon, but at some point, it's going to lose its steam, except now that they're moving out to Europe and spreading out like that and getting out in more different television outlets and streaming services. So it may, they may last longer than any territory ever has. But most territories were up and down anyway, any that I worked in, So I don't know if Buddy was the reason for that. But, there again, Jonathan, if the top guys left a particular territory and it started to fall off, a lot of other guys, even preliminary guys, would start looking around for a place to go, because even the preliminary money is going to because back then we had no contracts, right? It was word of mouth. Shaking each other's hand. You were told that you're going to get a minimum of so much a night or a minimum of so much a week. And that was the only guarantee was word of mouth or a handshake. So if the territory started to fall off, then everybody if you're obviously the opening match is going to get less than the main event and it's going to progress, on a growing scale as the amount gets to the main event. But wherever you were at on the card, it's going to fall off if business falls off altogether. When Mike was mentioning George Scott come in as the booker, George Becker had been booked. I first went into the Carolinas. First time it was in '63. Becker was the booker. And one of the top baby faces. The next time I went in was '67. And guess who was the booker? George Becker. And he was still one of the top baby faces, him and Johnny Weaver. When I went back in '71, guess who the booker was? George Becker, and he and Weaver were top guys. Danny Miller and I went in out of the they brought us in out of the Tampa territory as the number 2 babyface team. But then after Mr. Crockett died, Jim Sr., that's when they started to shift, and they figured George, had run his string. And my God, he'd been, been the booker there for almost 10 years and one of the top baby faces. So when George Scott came in as booker, he was going to change the whole territory, and he did. When he brought realized that territory, at least during my time, was built on tag. Every show had at least 2 tag matches. And normally it was going to be, unless it was like a world heavyweight title match or junior heavyweight title match, the tag team was going to be the main event at whatever the show was. And so George made the change of going to push singles guys when he brought Valentine in. Now here's a guy that Johnny took 30 minutes to get warmed up. I mean, if you're going to work with Johnny, you're going to put in some time. And when they started pushing him on top, this is a fact. There were people that had ringside seats for like God knows how long that were getting up leaving before the match was over because they weren't understanding what was going on. But once he got over, nobody left. Valentine was one of the greatest heels in my lifetime, yet he never did a huge amount of things. It wasn't like he chopped meat all the time, but what he did meant something. And that was the key. But territories grow and they shrink and they draw big and they don't, it's just a matter. But that's what happened in the Carolinas for so long. And I'm sure with Rogers being on top and the guys he worked with in that position, if he and say 3 guys left, there's a chance that the business fell off. One of the things I've never realized or never understood is in many territories I've been in that were hot, at some point, those particular 2 guys or 4 guys, whatever the deal is, are going to, run out of things to do. The newness and the heat is going to wear off. So you got to, but it seems like most of the time, everything was going so well that the booker or the promoter weren't looking past that. So when that started to die, they didn't have anybody ready to come in behind them, And so that was part of the problem, I think.
Let me quickly on Buddy Rogers and Johnny Valentine, who were, best friends for a jillion years along with Bobby Davis. Valentine was to come in from Dallas and Houston. Bastien was going to bring him, and the 2 were going to come in to work with another close friend, John Tolis, who I'm doing the book on. John and Chris Tolis, and Evan Ginsberg's been on my butt about doing it, so we're going to do it together. But this is 73, and Johnny is promised the book by Mike LaBelle, who was my big boss, but everybody hated him, loved his brother Judo, Gene LaBelle. So Johnny comes in, he does a TV, 2 weeks to hype his debut. He hadn't been in LA in 20 years when Jules Strongbow had put the Cowboy Rocky Valentine nickname on Johnny, which Johnny absolutely hated. He hated having to parade and come out with chaps, a fringe vest and a cowboy hat in the 50s. So he comes back at 73. Jules is in his last year booking with Charlie Moto, Mr. Moto. And they're getting, he comes in to do our Channel 13 TV, and then he's going to work a couple of dates for Inoki, and he's in New Japan. But he was hyping big time, and everybody was just ecstatic. First time ever in California, Valentine against John Tolis. As Johnny is a baby, Tolis is heel. So he's finished up. He's ready to come back from Japan, New Japan, to LA to do the thing and get going and book. And Mike LaBelle said, sorry, I changed my mind. I'm going to go with Louis Tillet from the Atlanta office and also bring in Leo Garibaldi. And Valentine told him to F himself. And instead, he made a call to Charlotte. And then I guess it was either Sandy or George Scott brought him in, and they transformed what had been like an older gentleman's tag territory to insane with veteran and young talent like Flair, Brunzell.
Well, they had Wahoo
Jr. Yeah, and
who never missed drawing wherever he went. That was a hell of a time too. Rufus Arch. I mean, there was a hell of a crew in Charlotte at that time. And then when after the plane crash, that was hard to see John with the crutch. It really was. First time I worked with John, I think was 63 on Cincinnati television. Had never met him, obviously had seen him, and we were in different dressing rooms. And Les Ruffin came in and said, "John said to tell you, thanks for the match." And I said, "Is he mad at me?" He said, "No, why?" I said, "Man, he was laying." Oh, he said, "That's just the way he works." And it was. You get used to it with John, but he was not dangerous. He would lay you back on those ropes, throw your arms up, push your chin back, and drop a forearm across my sternum still quivers when I think of Johnny Valentine throwing a forearm at me. But yeah, the man could draw money. There was no two ways about it. And like I say, with little effort in terms of physical effort, but he would take the time. Jerry Briscoe tells a story about working with John, and John's getting his heat. Gerald said, wondering about a comeback, because Gerald thinking, "My God, it's time for me." Gerald said, "Now, no, not yet, kid. Wait a little bit. Now, no, not yet." Gerald said it felt like it had been an hour before he got to make his comeback. But when John said "now," the place popped, and that's the way it was with him. Many great workers, and I'm going to go like this with my fingers in parentheses, workers, not acrobats, not anything of the sort, but guys who could tell a story and build a match.
Would you say carpenters with that? Would they fall under the carpenters?
Oh, a lot. We all started as carpenters, everybody. That's the way you had to build, a reputation as a good worker and as a safe worker as well. That's one of the greatest compliments. Lance Storm and I had this conversation a few years ago, and he was talking about working with Tommy Rogers. Tommy was injured, and they said, "Tommy, you're going to have to fill in." He looked around. He said, I'll only fill in if I can work with Lance. That was like saying, "Lance will take care of me." I had the same thing happen for me. It's probably 63, maybe 64. We were in Detroit TV in Windsor, Ontario. And Mark Lewin came in. He'd been out sick with flu or something at the time. And so Johnny Doyle, who was Barnett's partner, was in the dressing room at the time, and he handled Detroit business, Michigan business. So anyway, Mark comes in, and Doyle says, "How you doing?" I'm okay. I'm not 100%. He said, "Who am I working with?" And I don't remember who it was supposed to be, but Doyle told him, and John scrunched his face up like, Mark did. He looked around. He said, he looked around the room. He said, "Let me work with Thatcher." It was the nicest compliment I could have had up to that point in time, because he was saying, he will get me over. He will also protect me because I'm not feeling well. And that's the thing. You can't realize I worked with some guys who could have killed me in 3 minutes if they'd have wanted to. Harley, Danny Hodge, Bill Miller, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But you know what? I never felt them. And Cornette says, back in the day, there were a lot of badasses who didn't hurt each other or anybody else unless it was provoked. And today, he said, there's a lot of kids that aren't badasses that kill each other just to get over. And that's a fact. It is, But yeah, the guys were just, it was so important when I broke in to learn that you are to protect your opponent and he will protect you. You take care of one another. And little things. I see guys if they're wearing wrestling boots and not kick pads or something, gym shoes or something. But if a guy's his laces after he's tied them or swinging loose, I'm thinking, can't do that. I carried a rat tail comb in my bag for years, never used it to comb my hair at all. It was for the handle to shove my shoelaces down in my boots, because the old timers say, that little plastic tip can get in somebody's eye and hurt them. Things like that. They were concerned, Yeah,
I remember. I'm trying to think of who it was. Similar was telling a story, was teaching Bam Bam Bigelow. It was Bubba Ray Dudley talking about Bam Bam. They were in an ECW locker room. Bubba's new to the territory, let's say. So he's tying his shoes and all that, and or his boots, excuse me. And Bam Bam said, come here, kid," and showed him little things, not only as a big guy, but to say what you're saying about the shoelaces and the just like little details that people wouldn't think about.
Yeah, it was, and like I say, these were grizzled veterans. The first television I was ever on was in 1962 in Indianapolis. I'd left Boston, where I broke into business, and gone home, and I was able to make contact with the Indianapolis office. So they called me to get me started Indianapolis television. I'd never been on TV at all. I walk into the dressing room at the television, and there sits Fritz von Erich, Dick the Bruiser, the original Sheik, Joe Blanchard, Angelo Poffo, who's Randy Savage's dad, and Art Nelson, Stan Hoff, all these guys that I had bought tickets to see. If I tell that story to some young guy, I say, "And what did you say?" I said, "Absolutely nothing." I went and sat down in a chair, and until someone spoke to me, I kept my mouth shut. That was the other thing. You didn't have to tell me to respect these guys. I knew. I mean, well, the other thing about that is when kids break into business, they know it's a work. All right. They don't know how, but they understand it's a show. That's what they think of it as a show. When I got on a Greyhound bus in February of 1960 to go to Boston to learn my craft, I thought it was a shoot. I didn't know what I was going to see. I didn't know what was going to happen, but I knew damn well I wanted to do it. Had wanted to do it since I was 9 years old. And I started my training in February of 60. My first match was July the 4th of 60. And kids today will say, "When did they smarten you up?" I said, July the 4th, 1960. What happened between there? I said, they handed me my ass a few times. It was a closed shop. They weren't going to smarten you up until they were sure you were going to stick. In fact, that first morning that Tony Santos, the promoter, the guy that ran the school and everything, when I sat across from him, he said, "You remember here's how they taught us to work without telling us it was a work. They say, okay, you and you, I want you guys to go, we've learned a lot of holes. I want to be sure that mechanically they're sound. So I want you guys to go through a match. Now, nobody's going to win. It's no payoff or anything. He said, but put the holes on, but don't put any pressure." So they were teaching us to work. And that morning when Tony was telling me, "Today is your first day, you're going to go get your stuff." When I came back and sit down, he said, "Remember how they would have you go walk through the holes and walk through a match?" I said, "Yes, sir." "Well, that's kind of what you'll do today." So basically he's saying that these veterans you're going to work with today are going to take care of you, right? And see how you do. But he didn't tell me you're going to work like this every match for the rest of your life. So they were cautious before they smartened you up.
Well, let me ask this, and I'll bring Mike back in. Sorry, because it's on this kind of topic. And obviously, you've gone from getting trained, like you said, in Boston to where you are now, and you've trained folks for years and years. What, in that time span, what has been some of the biggest changes in the ethics and traditions? Because like you mentioned about walking into the locker room in Indianapolis, and there was a certain way you carried yourself when
Yes.
So what's the biggest changes you would say, Les?
Well, I think the biggest change is that guys today understand it's a show, or whatever they derive to call it when they first start their training. So they don't expect to be stretched. They don't expect to be, tested, and they expect it's a show. So I don't think they're taught the same respect. It's not. I don't believe it's that they don't have it. The respect. It's not been one of the paramount things they're taught during their training, right? To be respectful of the guys who brought you. And the other thing is, I don't know. Excuse me. I may have won I don't know, a few matches in my first year or so, first couple years. But when I knew I was going to put somebody over, I never said, "Hey, I want to get this in or get that in." I never said a word.
You didn't want to get your shit in? Come on, Les. No.
They told me what we were going to do, and I just said yes. And again, to work my way up so that I might be used at a higher place on the card was to do what I was asked to do it better than they expected, and just, protect the guy I was working with and make the crowd respond. So, it's entirely different now. When I got rid of I sold my school in 2002, and it's changed a lot since then. When I first started training guys in the early 90s, if your brother wanted to come watch you train, he wasn't going to come to my place. It was a closed door. Don't bring your neighbor, don't bring your kids if you got them. It's a closed shop still at that point. But then, Vince decided he didn't want to pay taxes in was in one of the states in Pennsylvania, Jersey. Yeah, Jersey or someplace. And he decided I'll smarten the world up. So he did. 9,000 bogus training places and 9,000 indie shows that should be out of business. So, but anyway, I still love the business. I'm not immured with all the things that go on in it now, to be honest. But
I think that's wrong with the business. Like, there are people today, they're not getting properly stretched by a Stu Hart or a Larry Simon, the great Malenko, etc. And there's one who I know very well from California. He's a big star. He's a great guy, great talent. But his gimmick, it's on his tights and his boots, the abbreviation for "get my shit in." So and he was doing that like almost from day one when he started working in California. I think that's very wrong.
Yes, I agree. I think, it's like learning any job, but, here's the crazy thing. I teach basics. I don't teach how to dive over the top rope. I don't teach quadruple somersaults off the top turnbuckle. I teach basics because I don't care if it's this year or 50 years ago. Basics are what this business is built on. Those holds and knowing how to use them and the timing. One of the things that I see today that bothers me is ring placement, knowing where you to put. When I see this guy makes a big comeback, knocks his opponent down. Now he's going to the top rope to come off with a knee drop or a big splash or something. But now the guy who's down there selling that is scooting. Right?
Oh, that's the most annoying thing.
Drives me out of my mind. It's like, here's the thing to the guy that's going to the top. You know where you want him, then put him there. Slam him there, drop a knee, stay. And then you climb. He's right where you want him, right? And it's that simple and that hard, I guess, all at the same time. And timing issues. When I see a guy, and I think the timing issues come from now. You realize if I worked a 60-minute match, whether it was 3 falls or 1 fall, all we knew what we were doing was if it was 3 falls, we knew 3 finishes. If it was 1 fall, we knew 1 finish. But none of the match other than that. I went through time limit draw with Danny Hodge, the winner, to get a shot at Kenny Mantell was the champion at the time. Danny dropped the belt at Kenny. Anyway, this was right here in Knoxville, actually, in 75. We worked the time limit. We got 5 extra minutes. Couldn't get a winner. Got 5 more. So we got time limit plus 10, and they finally flipped a coin. And Danny and I, all we knew was there wasn't a finish, so we didn't talk about anything, basically. So that's the art of the work. When you lay things out in the back, first of all, if I were capable of having any kind of match today, and I'm certainly too old to do that, but if you said, okay, we're going to lay out this 10-minute match, I say, no, we're not either, because I couldn't remember if I had to. I mean, plus, you don't know what the people are going to buy until you're out there. You and I could have a match here in Knoxville tonight and blow the roof off the place. Take that same match 175 miles to the west in Nashville tomorrow night, and the people sit on their hands. We better know how to change that. And that's to me, everybody that left my gym, my school, knew how to call a match on the fly. But I also tell them it's a business. If the guy is paying you good money to try to lay it all out in the back, then go for it. But you know what? You still need to know how to call a match on the fly because, okay, say I'm working with somebody and he's going to beat me with some elaborate move off the top rope. We're going 20 minutes. And 5 or 6 minutes in, he pulls a hamstring. Not bad enough that we can't continue, but bad enough he can't get to that top. He's not going to be able to do the finish. We better be able to change that finish while we're going. Here's a story I tell kids at training, and they look at me like, oh my God, what did you do? My first time, I mentioned Garibaldi as a booker, 66. First match I ever had in Atlanta. It was the old auditorium on Friday night. Roger Kirby and I against this tag team, in a tag team match. Now, Kirby may have worked with these guys, but I'd never even heard of them up to this time. And Leo was going to, not only the booker, but he refereed matches. And Leo was come in, and he said, first to me, he said, look, he said, I don't want you to think I'm going to start beating you from the get-go, but I need to get these guys over. These are going to be my top heels here for quite some time. Okay, fine. So it's business. So he came up with a finish. Okay. So we go out there, Kirby and I, and like I say, Kirby may have worked with these guys before. I don't really know, but I had never met them before and hadn't met them then until we were in the ring. But it was one of those matches where you couldn't have made a mistake if you wanted to. We had that old auditorium just rocking. Leo's refereeing the match. And in the middle of the match, Leo comes around and says, we're not wasting this. It's too good. We're bringing it back. Here's the new finish. And he called a new finish on the fly, and we went into it. Try that today with some of these kids, and they'd lose their mind. They'd have a heart attack right there in the middle of the ring. Mike, I was just thinking, where was the last time I saw you? And we had lunch at a restaurant next door to the Riviera when we were doing that video for Savoldi.
Yeah. Those 2 times. Remember the first one where I had to, we get there and we're supposed to, and I remember the restaurant because it was just bulldozed in the last year. It was a famous old time classic Vegas place. But the first of the 2 times we came in for Savoldi, we get there, and I have no problem saying this, and he'd assured us that the rooms would be paid for in advance, no problem. So we get there, and they want to take our credit card, and he goes, well, the front desk goes, well, we don't know anything about that. We need to take your credit card. And I told everybody there was like Honky Tonk Man and Jim Duggan, and I think George Steele, Jim Myers, etc.
And Bachman.
Yeah, and I go, no, we're going to get Savoldi down here, him or his brother, and they're going to give their credit card because we're in his talent. We're not going to get effed. I could see it happening.
Right.
And we stood our ground, and everything worked out fine.
That was a lot of fun. I had a great time with those guys. I never got to see that complete video ever.
He had a problem because he was doing stuff. He got the 2 separate competing Puerto Rican promotions on the Sunshine Cable Network out of Florida. And allegedly, with one of them, he got a lot of their old classic footage. I think it was Carlos Colon's, he had so many great, spectacular shows before the untimely, sad Brody murder. But Mario got that stuff, and then like all hell broke loose. It was all over the sheets and all of this stuff. But he was always, his dad was such an angel. Angelo, former NWA Junior world champion and stuff, like Kenny Mantell, who came in and booked for us for only a couple of months before Leo Garibaldi came in. And I want to ask you this quickly. So was that why Leo's booking? And he was tremendous, brilliant mind. He was the one who basically, Piper came in, Roddy, Red Bastien sends him in from Houston. He's supposed to do a one-shot for us. January 76 Battle Royal, then go up and get finessed with Roy Shire.
Let me stop.
Instead, Leo goes, Roddy's in the opening match, a draw with Tony Rocco, unrelated to Argentina Rocca, but falsely billed as Rocca's nephew.
Right.
But they have a 10-minute Broadway before Tony Rocco goes to work for Gene LaBelle, got him a job in New Japan. And Leo said, I think I can do something with this Piper kid. And he finessed and basically created, along with Gene LaBelle and Roddy himself, the whole Rowdy Roddy character, January of 76. And then Piper stayed for a good 2.5 years. And he and Lonnie Main were main eventing, which I never heard of in the territories, really. They were main eventing, always in the main events of two competing, not competing, but two different territories, unrelated, LA and San Francisco, at the same exact time. The only other guys that I knew doing that and in main events were Shibuya and Saito doing the same thing, but as tag champs in both promotions at the same time, LA and San Francisco. Yeah. Had you heard of guys consistently for like a year period main eventing in two territories at once?
Wow. When you talk about Leo and Piper, when Fuller bought this territory here in 74, and I came in to do his television and wrestle as well. And this was the hottest small territory in the country during that period of time, right up through 79. So anyway, we had a lot of top talent. We had Tanaka and, a lot of the guys out of New York and a lot of great talent. Kenny Lucas, my God. Anyway, Leo was booking LA at the time, and he called me and he said, I got a guy here I need to move. He said, the guy's not a great worker, but he's a hell of a promo. Young guy, he's learning. But he said, I want to get him out of here for a while because I don't want to burn him out. He said, you think you guys could take him? And I said, well, I don't know, Leo. I have to check with Ron. I said, well, I'll get back to you. So I called Fuller, and Ron says, hell, if Leo says he's good, I'm sure he is. But, I've got so-and-so waiting. And so he had several guys waiting in line. So we can't take him right now. So I called Leo back and I said, Leo, it just won't work out, Ron says. He said, damn, I'm sorry about that. So anyway, Leo was able to get this guy into the Carolinas, and it was Piper he was trying to give us. And instead, Roddy went to Charlotte and made it big there, him and Flair and Jones and that whole crew back then. So, yeah. That was Roddy I remember that.
Well, I wanted to ask it briefly. Was Leo reffing at the same time he was booking because that way he could call stuff on the fly, maybe remind or tell the guys when to go home and all of that stuff? Was that the purpose of it? Because it was a unique thing.
I think he just he was, when he would come in the dressing room and give you a finish, right? He would get into it. And then you're going to do this. And his body, he'd start. And you had to you would get excited about it in the dressing room because Leo was excited about it. I'll tell you what, I admire that man so much. I learned so much from him working for him in 66. But then when I went down there to work in the office, do television and wrestle, Leo was the booker then. And so I got to sit with him every day and learn from him and talk to him. But one of the things about Leo that he would call you on things. I was one Saturday there. I was going to a spot to a small town. I was going to be a special referee for the match. It was Jerry Oates and Billy Spears. And so Leo gives me the finish he wants for that. And I said, okay, how about the other matches? What do you mean? What do you mean other matches? I said, well, there's 4 more matches on the card, Leo. He said, how long have you been in this business? I said, about 13 years. You know any finishes? I said, yes, sir. He said, well, that's why I'm sending you. And so I'm going up there and I'm going to make it work no matter what, because Leo has put that kind of confidence into me. I love working for the guy. I did.
He was a sweetheart. A funny, not a rib, but a funny thing is we're at Red Bastine's Texas Shootout, annual reunion in Fort Worth at Carroll's Hotel. And we're listening to Leo and his wife sing karaoke nonstop. And Johnny Valentine and Reggie Parks look at me and they go, let's get the fuck out of here and go to a titty bar. They'd had a little too much as we loved Leo, they had a little too much of his operatic voice singing song after song. And that's what they did. They dragged me, the 3 of us, they went to Cheetahs or something.
Leo had a great sarcastic sense of humor, which I have as well. And that's one of the reasons I liked him too. He loved to rib a little bit. But he was dead serious about wrestling business. He was dead serious. I remember one night he rode with Kirby and I to a town. It don't matter which town. And Billy Spears was working with somebody, and Spears questioned Leo about the finish right there in front of all of us. And I didn't cross, things happened. So anyway, the show's over. We're back in the car, headed back to Atlanta. And Leo says, I hate to do it, but I've got to let Billy go. Kirby says, what? Spears? Yeah. Why? He said, you don't question the booker in front of the whole roster. He could have come to me privately. We could have done this, but he didn't. Again, that's the old school thing, right? It was a closed shop, but it was a shop that was run tight, and that's a fact. But yeah, Leo to me was one of the greatest bookers in my lifetime, along with Eddie Graham. Taleb was a damn good booker too. There were a lot, but you know what? All these guys were damn solid workers too. That's the reason. Garrett Ball. I remember Leo when I was a kid, boy. When his dad gave him the hot tag, Leo lit that ring up, man. He was all over the place, and that's what he expected out of the guys that worked for him too. Oh, and I forgot to tell you, that match that we had in Atlanta where he changed the finish in the middle. He said these guys are going to be his top heels for a long time. Those two guys happened to be Gene and Lars Anderson. And that was the beginning of the Anderson dynasty.
Can you tell us about, you get the two posters framed behind you. One of them is the Anderson brothers against yourself and Roger Rip Kirby. Can you tell us, or maybe bring the camera up so we can see more of it? Because the other one is the guy I worked with in San Francisco, Pat Patterson, who gave Roy Shire a lot of gray hairs at times.
A hell of a worker.
I was actually going to bring this up with the one poster.
Do you see the guy that Patterson's working with?
That's where I was going to go.
Real last name, yes. Barnett.
I can't see the rest of it. Like, what was the date of that poster, and who else was on the card? Mr. Puerto Rico. I don't know if that's Roberto Soto.
Well, Gorgeous George was actually George Bell from Montreal.
We can't see it. All I can see down is on the one is
the Patterson versus Moldy. Yeah.
Mr. Puerto Rico. I've got that card. Buzz Oreo, who was an old veteran. This was Eddie Ortiz was the guy's name. They called Mr. Puerto Rico.
But who's on top? It's cut off with your camera.
Gorgeous George Bell and his valet versus Jesse James. Jesse was a local guy, but a big baby face there for a lot of years. And George, that Gorgeous George was from Montreal. It's a blonde out of Montreal. And I forget the manager's name, but he was also a manager in Montreal at the time. On the other poster, that was in Carrollton, West Georgia Fairgrounds. The Torres, that was Roberto and
Ramon or Alberto?
Roberto and Ramon, yeah. Ricky was there, but it was Roberto and Ramon against Butcher Vachon and Louis Tollett. And the Andersons were Lars and Gene against Kirby and I. I guess Leo put us together with them. We had such a good match in Atlanta, first time we worked with him, that he thought we could have been married to him as far as I was concerned. Love working with the Andersons.
Believable, and very smart booking. They made you believe, they were like Valentine. They really did.
They draw you in. They do. You know what? They could make people believe today if they wanted to. They could.
Oh, that's the other thing I was going to ask, the stuff that drives you nuts. When now you see it often in both AEW and WWE, for example, not so much the other promotions like TNA, the guy on top doing the pinning, the guy who's pinning somebody, you'll see him physically push at the count of two, the guy he's pinning away from him. That drives me absolutely nuts, like the scooting into position thing. Timing issues.
Yeah. Well, a part of that, I think, not that particular move, but I think a lot of it is these guys call things in the back, and they forget them or forget the sequence, and they can't improvise. And you realize if you and I had a 30-minute match back then in one fall, and you're going to go over at 28 minutes, we know the last 2 minutes of the match, but that first 26, we're improv. And there are guys today, like I say, everybody came out of my school knows how to call a match on the fly, but like I say, it's a business. The guy wants you to lay it all out in the back, do what it takes to get your paycheck. But to me, you can't feel the people in the back, you know? And that's one of the things I say to kids. I said, would you go home and tell your wife or your living girlfriend, hey, we're going to make love tonight. Now, when I stroke your thigh, you moan, and then you do this. And like yourself, Mike, they start laughing. I'm sure Jonathan's laughing too. And I say, hey, it's cool. I'm meant to be funny, but I also making a point. You know that woman intimately. You know her likes and dislikes, her favorite color, her favorite food, et cetera, et cetera. And you would never do that. First of all, she'd probably throw you out of the bedroom anyway. But I said, my point is this. Saturday night, you're going to sit in the dressing room with a guy you're going to work with, lay out a match step by step probably for people you've never seen before in your life. Why would you do that?
So who put his hoo-hoo dilly in your cha-cha?
I did not have sexual relations with that woman.
Last thing I wanted to bring up, and I thought this was funny. We didn't bring this up the last time. And Mike, if you didn't see it, I'll get the video for you and send you a link like I did with that article. Les did an appearance on To Tell the Truth.
Ooh.
So you got to tell me about that, because that was quite entertaining, having people try to guess who's the wrestling trainer and all that fun stuff.
They hit 100%. Nobody thought the other two guys. But you know what? The guy from what was the TV? The black guy, the comedian.
Bill Cosby.
No. This guy was on To Tell.
Anthony Anderson. Is that who it was?
No. Anyway, no, it wasn't Andy Anderson.
You're talking about in the old days, right?
Very funny guy, though. But anyway, he obviously
Nipsey Russell.
No, God, no. Just shut up, Mike. The guy was obviously a wrestling fan and from around either Chicago or Indianapolis, because he asked one of the other two guys what was Dick the Bruiser's real name. And of course, they told myself and the other two guests that were supposed to be, were playing like they were the trainers, is you can't lie. You don't have, in other words, if they ask me what size of the ring, just say, well, I think it's 18 by 18. Don't say there's 16 foot, there's 20. That's telling them too much. But anyway, if he'd asked me, I had to say Dick Afflis. I couldn't have lied to him. And of course, that would have nailed it right there, because I doubt that a lot of people knew what Bruiser's last name really was. But he asked the other guy, and the other guy didn't know, of course. So for the comedian, that kind of ruled that guy out completely, because he figured he should have known Dick's last name. If I, as a fan, know, you should know if you're a wrestler, right? So, but that was a lot of fun to do.
Yeah, I'm trying to look it up on my phone as we. I'll put it in the comment, or not in the comment, in the bio. But it's just funny. You got three of you. You had the shirt on for the main event school. All three is. Yeah. But I figured I'd bring that up. Mike, do you have anything else you'd like to bring up?
I wanted to ask Les, because I talked at length to Bruno, who used to call me every Sunday, but he told me the story of Vince Sr. calling him at like 2 a.m, sweating it out when Eddie Einhorn brought the IWA. He was the money mark for that, as well as years later Pro Wrestling America, combining NWA and AWA. But in '75 with the IWA, Pedro Martinez, who ran Buffalo and parts of Ohio that the Sheik didn't run. So it was Pedro Martinez and Johnny Powers. And Bruno reassured Vince Sr., this IWA is going to fail sooner than later, because Pedro Martinez is involved with it and booking, and George Cannon and Al Costello aren't going to be able to fit with the book.
Wasn't his kid the booker? Wasn't Pedro's kid the booker?
No. That would be, you mean his son-in-law, Elio DePaulo?
No, not Elio. No, his actual son. He worked for that. I mean, he worked up.
Oh, yeah, Ronnie. Oh.
I was told he did some of the book, because I know, Nelson Royal worked for, I knew guys that, that actually worked.
Yeah, Nelson was teamed. I was the photographer. I shot at those 3 outdoor Roosevelt Stadium shows. Nelson Royal was teamed with Bob Ellis, and I thought I was in heaven seeing all these names I never really had an opportunity to be around.
Nelson was I love working babyface matches with Nelly, but I also, as a partner here in this territory for Fuller, Nelson was a great ring general. We I've done babyface matches with him where we've gone 30, 35, 40 minutes, and I never opened my mouth except to breathe. He called the whole match on the fly, and great times, great worker. I had lunch with his son here just a month or so ago, who's still running the Diamond R Western store in Mooresville, and it's expanded and growing and everything. Miss Nelson, I miss all the old guys. Realize at my age, so many of the guys that I've worked with are falling around me, man. It's like, I feel like I'm in a butcher shop, got my number and wait my turn, right, to get called. But
wait, listen to this. Two guys you know well. Leo Garibaldi brought him back after 10 years away. They had been babyface tag team champs for Jules Strongbow in L.A. Nelson Royal and Paul Jones, the wrestler, not the promoter.
Oh, yeah.
And Leo brought him back, and we thought we were in heaven. You know, it was very brief, but seeing those guys. But what I was going to say, the IWA, the first night, because everybody wanted to see what's going on, and the IWA was supposed to be taking on. They were in all the markets. They bought TV instead of doing a trade on the Avails ads. So that first show, to check out what's going on in the locker room, even though Eddie Einhorn and blah, blah, blah were saying they were going against the NWA and Vince Sr., Sam Munchnick, the Sheik comes in, Johnny Powers, who was partnering, with Martinez. Powers brings in Inoki, who brought in Thez, and then Thez brought in Ricky Starr, who never worked or anything like that, and he had grown a ponytail by then. And I can send you the photos of him posing with all of those guys, but with a ponytail. That locker room was packed with talent. George Callan and Al Costello trying to do their best to help Martinez with the book, and the kid Ronnie Martinez. When Pedro, you've heard all of that scandal stuff with the PM film and video library, and he offered me, I had no interest in buying that stuff, but all of that stuff, Pedro's widow and Ronnie's mom said that he had taken in the middle of the night all those videos and was trying to sell them to the highest bidder and yada, yada. And he somehow got involved with Savoldi, and now this father and son guy that do classic wrestling.
Who did Einhorn come to CAC with?
I don't know, but I made sure that he got an award on stage, and I introduced him up there because
whoever he came with introduced him.
Well, he brought one of his former business partners. Remember, he was co-owner of the Chicago White Sox.
Well, he also had, the way he got his wrestling on television, he had college basketball when it was fresh on TV, right? So he'd go to a station and say, hey, you like my college basketball? Yeah, we're getting good ratings. Well, good. Then you'll want to take my wrestling if you want to keep my college basketball. So, but anyway, I got introduced to Eddie in Vegas, and I said, oh, you're the guy that kept trying to take my paycheck out of my hands in the Carolinas years ago. Oh, no, it wasn't me. I said, yeah, it was too. But he did things like fly you in and rent you a car. Nobody was doing that, if you had to go a long distance, they would fly you. But normally you're driving, even if you're going to a different territory many times. So he did some things, but it just, I heard that the booking was the bad part. He had some good talent there. AEW the same way, no booker. They've got some great talent. Just don't know. Nobody knows how to use those guys. So.
Well, it's because the owner was a mark, and now he's head booker, and everything has to go through him. Where at least Vince Jr. learned at the foot of his dad, and it's a little frustrating. That AEW is so much wonderful talent, and they're doing much better. Their crowds, this is a big plus. We don't want anybody to go under or have difficulties. The last 6 weeks in a row, AEW's audience shares have been increased by 10 to 20,000 each week. So
just talking about that on a podcast this morning. This last week, no, they're the only company that I've ever seen that go into overtime, run over their time, and the numbers drop instead of pick up. And they did this past week. Here's the other and we talked about this morning. I know Tony Khan's got they got a lot of money. They're billionaires, okay? And they've got big good financial contracts with TNT and TBS, et cetera. They're on Max now. Okay. But in recent times, NXT on Tuesday night is pulling more numbers than than AEW's flagship.
Without competition, and they were on the same night back in the
without on Wednesday. And I said today, I said it last week, and I'll probably say it again next week. If I was an owner or the booker or a talent in AEW and saw how their numbers fell off, and how actually the developmental territory of WWE is outdrawing them, and they shouldn't be, I'd be concerned.
Oh yeah.
But it's been ongoing, and is it WrestleNomics or something? It comes up with a lot of these figures. I know the guy that does the podcast with me, he puts them up. But yeah, they and the other thing they'll say, okay, their numbers were up this week. They did this share. It's not bad. But from a year ago, they're down 20%. And WrestleNomics did. I saw a chart that showed that when Punk left there,
it killed it.
They started falling off, and their numbers have been going south almost since then. Now they did great in Wembley, and the second show was decent in Wembley too. I don't think I'd have run there that soon again. But anyway, yeah, I mean, and when I say that, I don't know Tony Khan. They tell me he's a nice guy, but he's not a booker. No. And I want to, there's guys there that I've worked with and helped train and are friends. I don't want to see them lose their job, but I'm thinking, damn, how long can, is your dad going to let you finance this? And again, you've got good contracts with the network, but the network looks at the numbers. And that's who you got to satisfy, not me or not the fans necessarily. But yeah, they need a booker. But right now, I think as long as that thing is run the way it is, and pretty much everybody calls their own shots from what I understand, or it's just Tony. I had somebody tell me that if you went to Tony and say, Tony lays out an idea, you say, I don't think that's going to work. Well, why not? Okay. But we're going to do it anyway. So yeah, okay, it's Tony's money. I get that. And these guys,
you can't hotshot angles. They ran through something in like one night that could have been strung out over 3 to 4 months.
Yes.
Made a lot of money. Did some great storytelling. They missed the mark there. I mean, I love it. I never miss it. The pay-per-views Jonathan and I watch together, they're absolutely incredible. But the other thing that's sort of distressing, they were in a beautiful old venue, the Sacramento Municipal Auditorium, a couple of weeks ago, and it is unique looking, like the one in New York, I think it is, that Jonathan might have gone to just recently. But that's
Manhattan Center.
Yeah, that Sacramento venue. There were empty seats, not all. There were, but it was mostly packed. There's still empty seats. Roy Shire ran that venue weekly for 6 years, always SRO.
Yeah,
the 60s.
Right.
And they couldn't do it the one and only time they were ever there. That is truth telling that they have had to now downsize from much larger venues, as I'm sure Russell Economics has talked about with you, to much smaller venues. So it looks packed, but it's nice ambiance, but it looks small time to compare to the huge venues they were doing pre-COVID.
And I've had some people say, well, as there's guys there that must know it. He's not doing it. I said, yeah, but they're probably making more money than they've ever made. They're not going to rock the boat.
But the talent that's like sitting at home, why can't you, if Tony, burn through talent and then they got to sit at home and not be on television whatsoever for 5-6 months, like Russo, right. Rusev, Miro, etc., which is criminal. Why not just show a little 10-second video of them rehabbing, or whatever the excuse is going to be, but you can say they're rehabbing, they can't wait to get back, and that keeps them still fresh in the fans' mind, rather than to not mention them whatsoever.
Well, something I've heard fans complain about, and I complain about constantly, because I've worked the desk before, obviously as a commentator, color and play-by-play, is when they bring a new face in, if you're in the business like I am, you might know who that person is and know some of their background. But if you're a fan, you may never have seen this person, and but they don't tell you any background, right? And I'll tell you what, with Okada, I have a friend of mine in his late 50s that grew up on Memphis wrestling and comes over once in a while to watch wrestling with me. So when I saw Okada was coming in for AEW, I told my friend, I said, man, you're going to want to see this guy, because, watching him with, the guys for New Japan, I thought, hell, he's going to tear it up. I'm still waiting to see that Okada. He has not appeared on my television since he's been with AEW. And my friends, after the first few, and they bring him in and make him second banana to the young neverminds.
Well, if Tony Khan wants to have Les come in, his number is 865. No, I'm not going to do that. I'm kidding.
Listen, as much as I would like his money to go in there and try to straighten that out after it's been going that way for how many years now? 5-6 years?
Yeah.
Would be the biggest. I mean, to all of a sudden tell these guys who have been doing what they want to do when they want to do it, all of a sudden they can't do that anymore.
Yeah.
It would
I could see Les and Bully, Bubba Ray Dudley, who's a sharp super mind. He's like the Les Thatcher mentally of the more younger guys, today's guys. You guys could turn that place around. It would take obviously some time and free reign and Tony not interfering, however, though.
You mentioned Bubba. I was told by, I forget who it was, anyway, that Bubba offered Tony Khan, I will book your company for free.
Yep, he did. He said it on the radio. Bust it open.
Have you guys watched Legends and Future Greats?
Yeah,
I have.
I tell all the young guys that I've said on podcasts that I'm on, if you're an aspiring wrestler, if you're an independent guy wanting to work up, watch it. And more importantly, listen to the comments of Bubba and Mark Callis and everybody else too. But that one guy, I think I was waiting for Bubba to knock him on his ass.
Oh, that BJ guy or whatever.
Yeah.
No respect.
Listen, 60 years ago, Jonathan, somebody would have knocked him on his ass.
And nobody would have said a word about it.
No, you're right. They wouldn't have. You wouldn't have.
But speaking of training, before I do got to put a bow on it, because the seminars you've done, and I know you've worked with this cat, so I'd be curious to get your opinion on him. Danny Cage over at the Monster Factory.
Danny's a character. He's a good guy. He's learned a lot from the people he brings in to work with him. They've got a hell of a facility there. They really do. I mean, there's an amateur club that comes out of there. There are people that move to that area so their kids can wrestle for the amateur coach. I've met
Paulsboro camp.
Yeah. The guy's but they've got a weight room. The entire auditorium where the rings are set up to train has matting on amateur mats on the floor. But I've done a couple weekend camps there with Dr. Tom, with Rudy Gonzalez. Who else?
I know Briscoe's been there a couple of times.
Yeah. Bill DeMont has done some with us. Shane Helms. Anyway, yeah, it's a great place. Danny's a good guy. I tell him you're a basic New Jersey guy. You got an attitude, and he does, and he's his own worst enemy sometimes because he says what he thinks, But he's got a hell of a facility, and he legitimately cares about. Damian Priest. I worked with Damian there. I met Damian the first time there. That's been 6, 7, 8 years ago. Well, the first time
when he was doing the Ring of Honor stuff.
Yeah, and Damian's a good guy too. I'm glad to see him do well. I really am.
Punisher he's one of the most giving guys. I knew him when he first started training. I was maybe 18 to 20, and he was a couple years older. His story's been told. He was doing the bouncing and everything else, and I remember when he came back.
When I see him work now, the one thing that crosses my mind when he was still there with Danny, I don't know if it's the last time I was there. It's been obviously a few years ago.
Yeah.
That he and I sat down, we're just talking, and he said, I want to ask you something. I said, sure. He said, I gave up a lot to pursue this. And I said, I'm sure you did. And he told me about it. And he said, but, I'm starting to struggle. He said, how long do you think I should keep plugging away? And I said, man, there's only one guy can answer that question. That's the guy looking back at you from the mirror. I said, you're the guy that's got to make that decision. I can't, me or anybody else can make that for you. So when I see that he's done so well, I'm happy for him. Really nice guy and turned into a hell of a worker too.
Yeah. Very respectful, always respected the previous generations and trainers. And for Punisher, I know him as Luis, but you couldn't ask for a nicer guy.
Yeah, he was Luis Martinez when he was there at the Monster Factory.
Yeah. Not the original.
Like I said.
Not the original Luis Arriba Martinez.
No, that's another Luis Martinez.
Yeah. But he's like you said, Les. He's one of those guys you couldn't ask for, to get, the success he's had. So
yeah, he's earned everything he's got. I think I truly believe that.
Is there anything else you want to mention or plug that Waterloo training seminar again before we?
Well, you know what? Let me put the glasses on. Here's mine.
Okay.
And mention about Waterloo is the night, the whole weekend. I'm going to say this: I was inducted in 2023. The first time I was ever there. I walked into that museum, and I said to myself, "I'm home." If you are a wrestler, if you love wrestling, if you're going to be a wrestler, you need to at least go there and see the displays and just look at the history of the business. Plus the amateur stuff is good to look at, the Dan Gable stuff as well. But anyway, this year it's Thursday, Friday, Saturday, July 17th, 18th, 19th. We're training from 9 a.m. Till 4 p.m. With a break for lunch, which is supplied obviously and a souvenir T-shirt. And the trainers, myself, Ron Hutchison, D'Lo Brown, Joe Malenko, James Beard, and like I said earlier, over 200 years of experience combined, plus some of the other guys. Well, Mike, like in Vegas at CAC, some of the guys that are there for the hall, some of the legends and stuff will come by and look, and add a few comments here and there. But anyway, they're limited to 20 students, and it's $125. But I suggest you can add 75 to that 125, and for the 200, you got the whole weekend. You got the VIP pass, the awards banquet, the meal, which is great by the way. Both years that I've been there, and all the Q&A sessions. There's something going on all the time, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. I would suggest that. If you're interested, the phone number to call is 702-459-7529, or you can go email info@WrestleConnex, and Connex it's all one. WrestleConnex is all one word. Connex is CONNEX.com. Excuse me, to reserve a spot or to ask questions or see what you. And I suggest, like I say, I suggest for young wrestlers or if you're just a fan, check it out. That Hall of Fame is well worth spending your time at. And real quickly, let me mention the one I'm doing next month, 11th, 12th, and 13th in Kingsport, Tennessee, at the Net Pro Studios, and it's going to be 3 days. It's $200. We train from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. on Friday, 9 to 4 on Saturday, the show that night, and 9 to 3 on Sunday. Lunch is served each and every day. And if you're interested, you can contact Matt Sigmund at sigmundwrestling@gmail.com. Joining me there is George South, who's a hell of a senior trainer like myself. Matt Sigmund, Brad Thomas, and Chance Prophet are all young guys I've worked with in seminars before, and we have a good time. And it's a little fellowship to begin each day too. But it was a great time. And the lunches last year, they had brought in the makings for chicken burrito bowls from Chipotle. So I'm just going for the lunch this year.
And if
Like,
you want Dr. Mike to do the photography during these sessions, you can reach him at 510. No, I wouldn't do that.
If someone would like to book me for a one-day seminar, which I prefer weekend camps, honestly, Saturday and Sunday, because you get more out of it. The wrestlers get more out of it, and they become more comfortable. And spending more time with the guys that you're training, you can see what they need. But if anyone's interested in that, they can email me, lesthatcher28@gmail.com, and I'll be more than happy to send them out the information, what I include in that, how much it costs, and so forth and so on. But I will say this, you give me a weekend with a young wrestler, I feel very certain that I can send him home on Sunday with something new in his arsenal that'll help improve his business and help him move up. So, talk about loving the business, it's who I am, it's what I do, right? I don't, I've been, my entire adult life. I turned pro at 19. And I've been doing this for 65 years as of July the 4th. And I don't want to do anything. I mean, I'm working my son here in Tennessee now. He's got a couple of lots where he sells storage buildings and carports and stuff. I'm doing that. But again, if you got something for me to do wrestling wise, he'll be happy to get rid of me and I'll be happy to do it. So like I say, I love the business and it's who I am. It's what I do. So.
You're giving away those things too inexpensively. $200. It should be quite a bit more. So what a bargain. I'm not kidding. It's too.
You know what? If I were a young guy today and new guys like myself or Tom Pritchard or Lance Storm or Rudy Gonzalez are doing training seminars or weekend camps, I'm there every chance I get. And when I see these things, I've been to some that I look around and think, where the hell is everybody? And that's part of the problem. The kids today are smart going in when they learn. And I've been doing this 15 minutes. I already know everything. Okay, gotcha. That's the problem with the indies today, I think, is.
Wait, wasn't the old adage that you had to do consecutive shows in the territory days for like 6-7 years before you really got it?
I was told 5 years, yeah. And realized we were working any place from 4 to 6 nights a week with a different guy probably every night. And I've told guys, you can't learn this business in the ring once a week or once a month. There's just no damn way. And you can't get ring win any place but in a damn ring.
Exactly.
That's a fact of life. So yeah, you got to give to get. I don't care what the business is. In this business, you got to give a lot to get something. I got you. Yeah, it's good talking to you and good to hear Michael again. Like I say, the last time I saw him, he didn't.
Hey, didn't you go? I was going to say, didn't we go to some Mobile Fields family reunions back?
Were you at Mobile too? Did you go? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Being Lord Jonathan Boyd of the not the Fabulous Kangaroos, the Royal Kangaroos do his drag bit.
Royal Kangaroo. They were the Royal Kangaroos. I can't even talk in Charlotte, but it wasn't Jonathan. It was
Frederick Charles. It was Norman Frederick Charles and I thought Jonathan Boyd. They were the tag guys.
Yeah, they were, but Jonathan was never at Mobile.
Okay, so it was. You're right. The other one.
Yeah. He was there. A lot of the guys I miss. The Undertaker's manager.
Moody.
Percy Pringle.
Yeah, Percy, great guy. Yeah.
Don't get me started on that son of a bitch.
There's a picture. There's a picture up on my Facebook page now of me and Danny Hodge and Dennis Hall. It was from one of the Mobile reunions. At two guys I love to death too. That I miss a lot of guys, man. So many guys that I've worked with are gone, and it's good to remember them and think about them. It truly is.
Just quickly, was Ole, you were in the office quite a bit with Ole, who always gets this bad rep as being grouchy. And yeah, he was grouchy and blah, blah, blah. But didn't he have his other moments too when he was kind of okay to be around?
When I was running the tours for WCW in Ohio, Michigan, and West Virginia back in, what was that, Les, 82 and 83, Ole rode with me some. Then he was kind of a normal guy. But otherwise, Ole is just the asshole that Ole is. And when I say that, I say it with a smile on my face. I love working with him in the ring, And if you know how he is, you get around it. You don't, you just say that's Ole and move on, But he had a sharp head, but him and Mick Foley and Angelo Poffo. I never knew Angelo that well, but I was told he was so tight. Somebody told me once, he said, if he makes $100 a week, he deposits 125. That's how tight Angelo is. But Ole was just like Mick. I remember one time Ole rode me, and I'm looking at the sport coat he's got. I said, that looks like. Now I realized this was an 82 or 83. I said, that looks like one of the sport coats you had when we were wrestling in Charlotte. Oh, he said, it is the same sport coat. Jim Crockett Jr. bought him either a Mercedes or a Beamer because Ole was driving the same 69 Ford convertible to the office all the time. Everybody else was driving Cadillacs and Mercedes and BMWs, and Ole was coming in his old beat up 69 Ford convertible. And Jim bought him a car so he could leave the Ford at home. But yeah, a lot of great memories. It's been I've had a good time talking with you guys. We'll have to do it again sometime.
Of course, and we're not going to wait 4 years to do it again. That's right.
All right, fine. I may not be. Listen, man, at this age, I may not be around another 4 months. Never mind 4 years.
You could say that for anybody, though, Les.
Yeah, that's true.
It's got to be because you're the sharpest guy from the great territory. You and Jerry Briscoe, the two sharpest guys we have left, and we cherish you guys. Much respect.
Man, I appreciate that. I'll see Gerald, and Gerald will, of course, be in Waterloo in July. He's the president of the board there. He's the top guy.
Right on.
Well, I still treat him like Gerald, but he's still the top.
Les, thank you so much for the time.
Hey, guys, I've enjoyed it. And you and Mike ought to fly out here, and we'll have lunch.
That sounds like a plan for me.
Hello, wrestling fans. This is Lanny Poffo, formerly the genius of WWE. You are listening to Crazy Train Radio. Ooh, yeah.